Greetings and welcome to the pod. My name is Mark West. Wild swimming is something of a cousin to ocean swimming, or is ocean swimming a subset of wild swimming? Either way, wild swimming is huge across the world, and particularly in the UK and Europe. It's also often stunningly beautiful. Search wild swimming on Instagram and you'll see what I mean. Callum Hudson is the middle brother of the Wild Swimming Brothers, triathlete, ice swimmer, author, nature lover, swimming advocate, and wild swimmer. He has swum the world's most powerful maelstroms, escaped Alcatraz, and swum between continents. The Wild Swimming Brothers started with a 140-kilometre swim down the River Eden, as you do. We had a wonderful chat down the line from Singapore about the whole gamut of things that make up the world of wild swimming.
The terminology wild swimming has become, it's become quite big and quite fashionable in the UK. What I'm always interested in is that something that resonates with in Australia, do you think? Because to me, it seems like wild swimming is something that's relatively confined in terms of like a term that makes sense to some urban communities. Like England is so densely populated, very little wild left. So the concept of wild swimming seems to make sense to people, whereas we're planning some swims in Canada, and it doesn't quite have, because they're like, well, what do you mean? What we always swim outside.
Yeah, right. Yep.
It's beautiful everywhere. Well, we don't need to escape the city. The city is in the forest.
Yeah. No, I mean that's interesting. So it's not it wasn't a term that I had heard of before until the last little while. So I'm not a great ocean swimmer or anything. I just really quite enjoy it in summer. And Sydney, we're very lucky because you can go to the beach any day of the week if you like, and there's always something on the weekends. You can go for a swim in the ocean. So I hadn't really thought too much about swimming in dams and rivers, and I mean most of our rivers are drying up anyway. But I can see in the UK that it's a different concept. It's swimming in cold outdoor rivers and lakes and dams. I mean, how would you describe wild swimming?
I would describe it as that. It's more about getting back in touch with nature. So it resonates mainly, like we've seen it in terms of like, so my brother runs a fitness magazine, so he looks at a lot of our analytics and like where our subscribers are and where our, we published a book, so we were looking at like who bought the book, etc. And it seems to be in cities, which is not necessarily what you would imagine. I think our like biggest is London, Bristol, Manchester, etc. So the big kind of urban hotspots in the UK. And I think we're from the Lake District originally, which is an area of England it's the least sparsely populated county in England, I believe. Beautiful countryside. There's lakes everywhere. It's a swimmer's dream. And we hadn't heard of the term either. It wasn't something we were familiar with. The reason we're called the Wild Swimming Brothers is obviously quite fortuitous, but our parents are divorced. We were kind of raised by our mum, and her last name is Wild.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, so we're the Hudson brothers, Jack, Callum, and Robbie. But our mum is Tina Wild, and our grandma is Grandma Wild, and Grandma lived in the Scottish Highlands. She was, she had no TV, like had a grass roofed house. She was probably one of the people in our lives who kind of got us really outdoors, in touch with nature. So when we were like, we've got to give ourselves a name, as you do. We didn't really want to be like the Hudson brothers.
Yep.
So we're like, well, what can we come up? Let's give a nod to mum and grandma, and then obviously it kind of tied in nicely with that. That was the first time we'd really started to hear about people call it wild swimming, and I think there's a lot of people who is it outdoor swimming? Is it wild swimming? Well, outdoor swimming could include a Lido, but
Yep.
wild swimming can't. Ocean swimming. What is an estuary ocean swimming?
It's a good question. I mean, it's perfect, isn't it? In Sydney, if I go for a swim and I go in the ocean, it's quite warm, but in the Lake District in England, it would pretty much be cold all year round, right? How did you what made you jump in the water in the first place?
Yeah. What do you think the temperature roughly is in Sydney?
In the water, I mean, we're in the middle of winter right now. I'd say the ocean is 19, 20 degrees or something like that.
Okay, that's very warm. I'm pretty sure the lakes don't get above that in winter, in summer. Sorry, we did a long distance loch swim in Scotland in August, so the warmest time of the year. September can be a little bit warmer depending on the summer, but and I think that was like a 12, 13 kilometer swim, and it was about 13 degrees.
Wow.
But yeah, it's cold. It's really cold.
Do you ever swim without a wetsuit, or is it a wetsuit pursuit?
The majority of the time when we swim as the three of us, we wear wetsuits, um, because we've all roughly got different paces. So Robbie's the stockiest. He's a weightlifter effectively, and he does a lot of weight training. So he's very muscular. He's shorter. So he's a slower swimmer. Jack's incredibly tall and has the best stroke and technique. And then I'm somewhere in the middle. So when we swim together, we like to actually swim, next to each other. So we wear wetsuits because the fastest person doesn't. Because if you're going at a pace below your normal pace, then you can develop hypothermia. You're not going fast enough, or if you're the slowest and trying to go at someone else's pace, you just crash out. So we wear wetsuits when it's the three of us, and then when we're individual, we go skins. So most, some of the biggest swims, me and Jack did ice kilometers this year.
Oh wow, yeah.
So that was a new. We'd never done it before, and half the time you spend so much time talking about swimming, and you're like, "Bah, I really better push my swimming."
Mm.
So yeah, we kind of got into that a little bit.
Wow, where did you do the ice kilometer?
I did it in England. There's this whole lovely culture in London. So the London Lidos get below. I think the lowest temperature my local Lido got to is 2 degrees.
Really?
So it's
Yeah, it's
incredibly cold, and ice swimming has to be below 5 degrees. So as long as the water drops below 5 degrees, that's an ice swim. So I said to myself in September, I was like, right, this is the first year, no wetsuit, skins. I'm going to swim the whole way through, go all the way around. Fortuitously, I was about 400 meters. I got moved into a flat very close to the pool, and they have this whole culture around it. There's a wood-fired sauna, and it's you get a real sense of camaraderie in January when it's snowing, nipping out in your speedos. There's 10 other people. You don't really talk. You're all kind of. Some people are like psyching themselves up, and other people are meditating, and
Yeah.
everyone swims, and then you go in the sauna afterwards and you chat. So it was that. I think other than that's probably the hardest swim I've done. I think the extreme cold is harder than distance, I think.
Yeah, how do you prepare for that? I can see how you prepare for distance by training, but is that the same way you prepare for the cold?
It's like a weird combination of half of it's like similar to distance training, meticulous repetition and almost like a science. I have to swim every day. I have to do, if I miss a week or miss a couple of days, then my body's not acclimatized. So you have this very repetitive, gradual acclimatization. You have to start in September and swim 10 degrees, 9 degrees, 8 degrees, 7
Yeah.
degrees, 6 degrees. But then that also feeds the psychological side of it. And it's almost kind of like extreme condensed meditation because you have to really focus on your breathing, and you're basically going into you're self-inducing early stage hypothermia
Yeah.
in the knowledge that how far you can go. So with the ice swimming, an ice swim basically begins when you get out the water, and it's all about the recovery. So the hardest part of the swim is once you've got out the water, and you might do An ice kilometer, I think, took 20 minutes, a little bit under, because you're quite slow in the cold water. But the recovery can be up to 45 minutes. Multi-stage recovery. You have to do various things in various orders. Mine was, I'd get out, you'd pat towel dry, because if you rub, it brings the blood vessels to the surface. So you pat towel dry, leave the swim cap on, immediately put flip-flops on to stop losing heat through the feet. Small bite of chocolate to kick in, and then I would do like stretches, but not too warm, because you can't go too warm too quickly, because then you get after drop. And
I've heard of the drop, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have to go, and then you have to, gradually warm up in the chain, because what you want to do is jump in a hot shower or jump in a boiling hot sauna, but that then can, lead to cardiac arrest or fainting, so you have to gradually do it. But then there's this weird, you're then in a public place doing that. So you're in a sauna with 15 other people who've maybe done like a 2-minute swim or a 3-minute swim. And I would go in with my woolly hat on, holding a flask of tea, and you basically uncontrollably shake.
Yeah, right.
And for about 20 minutes, and I'd be sat there, and I'd be like, shaking. And you can't speak, your mouth kind of, you start slurring your words. You're a bit like confused a little bit.
Yeah, your tongue's probably frozen, right? Like,
yeah, so you're there shaking away and slurring, and everyone's like, "Are you all right?" And you're like, "Yeah, it's just part of the process."
Are you tempted to do it again?
I am. I managed to do the kilometer, but that's kind of the fool's challenge. Really, the ice mile is like the
mile, right?
Yeah, and I've heard people say it's tougher than the channel, and a kilometer, it was manageable. Like I've never swam more than 14, 15 kilometers in the ocean, so I'm not like a marathon swimmer. I've never done any of the big channels, but the kilometer was really, really tough and took a lot out of you. I don't know how people, that extra 600 meters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing you posting about that.
Well, I'm screwed now because I'm in Singapore, so the water.
Yeah, that's right. You're totally unacclimatized now. And so, what got you into the wild swimming in the first place? You talked about your grandma in the Lake District. Was it that getting reconnected with nature, that sort of thing?
Probably a combination of kind of, we were into it before I'd ever even thought about it. Like we grew up outdoors. We were always swimming in rivers, going to the beaches. Yeah, grandma in Scotland lived in the wilds. Our mum never taught us to be afraid of nature, and it's something I see now where, because we get approached by a lot of groups who kind of promote safe swimming and anti-drowning. And I'm totally for that. It's like, well, of course.
Yeah, who isn't, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pro-drowning in swimming. Well, but at the same time, it's important that this group's doing it, but it's just, I don't think it's the thing that you should encourage more than the act itself. There's not people out there, championing how dangerous hill walking is, because people die climbing mountains every year. And I think there's a little bit of the health and safety wrapping cotton wool brigade that's in the UK at the moment. There was a report last week, and my little brother did an interview with BBC News about water pollution in the rivers. And the report said, not a single river in the UK is safe to swim in.
Okay, right.
Which frankly is complete nonsense. We've swam in countless, at least 15, 16 rivers over the last 5 years, never got an ill. You're not convincing me that we swam the source to sea rivers, the whole length of rivers. It's kind of scaremongering, headline grabbing. If you're interested in the outdoors, why would you spend your time trying to stop people going outdoors, as opposed to, yes, there are risks. Yep. That's why we're doing it. Like, if you don't want the risks, then just stay at home. But if you want to swim in the ocean, there's waves and there's currents and you need to learn about them. There's wildlife and you need to learn about them. Or there's cold and you need to learn how to overcome it. I think people want what I'd call Instagram wild.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. That Instagram actually. I mean, this is how I learned about wild swimming. There's a lot of wild swimmers on Instagram. Some beautiful places in the world.
Apologies, we've in no part helped that.
Oh, I like it. So it's good. And as far as I understand from reading your story, that you guys started off by swimming 140 kilometers down the River Eden. Was that seriously your first swim together? 140 kilometers?
That was our. It was our. Well, it was actually our second. I mean, as brothers, we swam in lakes and swam at the beach. We'd never ever worn a swim cap and goggles and done a swim together though. River swimming is very different to ocean swimming because it's much less psychologically challenging. The banks are never that far away from you, and there's always, even if it's not a very fast flowing river, you can rest, do breaststroke, lie on your back, let the current take you. So actually, river swimming, I would argue, is one of the best for beginners. And at that stage, we were very much beginners. Okay, there's rapids and waterfalls, but as long as you plan out a route, you can be very safe. There's no real threats of wildlife in any rivers in Europe, so you don't have that psychological challenge. I think a lot of it for beginners is the depth of the water, deep water fear, and wildlife, and a river swim. It was kind of like, it was more of a road trip.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know that sounds strange because obviously it sounds extreme in the distance and etc. But really, it was me, my brothers, and a couple of friends from school. Meandering down a river for 9 days.
That sounds pretty awesome. Camp at night and then get back in.
Camped at night. I feel like that the purest form of how I enjoy swimming. That captures it in its entirety. Really, it's an adventure. Swimming is only part of it. There's more to it than that. You're exploring somewhere new. You're with other people. Of all the challenges we've done, and solo swims, short swims, long swims, cold swims, I think I'd urge people, a group river swim, even if it's a 2-day swim, just 10k, camp overnight, 15k to finish or something. There's something wonderful about the river swimming, and that's really what kicked it off for us. And we started that because it was our childhood river. We'd grown up with the river flowing past our garden, and we sold our family home and decided to swim that river to kind of say goodbye and close a chapter of our childhood. And then after that, it's all just got out of control, really, and here we are.
So how long do you think you'll have to swim? I mean, you're living in Singapore for a year. How long a river swim are you going to need to detox from living in Singapore?
A lot. It's again, this is not really, I've really thought about it since moving here. This may not be the case, and I'm maybe on a small anecdotal sample of data, but it seems to be here so far that there's not the same concept, because everyone I speak to, well, is there anywhere good to swim outdoors in Singapore? Where can I swim outdoors? Well, the pool, the outdoor pool. You've got one at your condo.
Yep.
No, but somewhere, a lake, a reservoir somewhere, and no one really swims outdoors. And there's one beach where you can kind of swim, but it's all gated off with barriers, and there's 100 freighter ships just outside the barrier. So it doesn't. I don't know whether it requires, how long it requires a society to disconnect from nature. Singapore is only, formed 1965. It's a relatively young country. You've got a society who's just experiencing the benefits of modernization. It would be interesting to know how long that then becomes, look at what we've lost.
Yeah.
Look at the nature that we've lost. Look at the wildlife we've lost. I think unfortunately, in the UK, we lost that nature and wildlife, hundreds of years ago. I was reading a story about the last wolf in the UK, and it was like 1760s. The last wolf was shot, and people forget these things. And how can there be a report in the UK that not a single river is safe to swim in? So I think it takes a little bit of time for people to become disconnected and then want to return. But yeah, Singapore's. I'm swimming more than I've ever swum because there's a pool outside, so I can swim every day. It's warm, so I don't have to psych myself up or anything. But I feel soft.
But it's different, yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing I'm definitely learning, that you you rise to the challenge, and if the challenge is a 35-degree heated infinity pool, you're not going to rise that much. If you've grown up swimming in Sydney with dangerous wildlife, or you have to get used to swimming with large great whites or different species of sharks, then you're probably much more comfortable in that because you've risen to it. If you grow up swimming in Scandinavia, you're probably much more used to cold temperatures and tougher as a result. I think I'm undoing years of hard work here.
So you've swum in some pretty cool places, like up in Scandinavia through the maelstroms and between Europe and Asia, or Asia and Europe, I think, was it? At the Hellesport and various locks and whatever. Have you got what was your favorite? What was the most challenging?
I think one of the most iconic ones, and probably lots of people would say this, but I did the solo Alcatraz swim.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that.
It was really, I just loved San Francisco. It was shrouded in fog, incredibly atmospheric. I went down to Golden Gate, and there was the foghorns booming. You could only see half of the bridge. Spent the week kind of swimming down at the Dolphin Club, and one of the oldest, most iconic swimming clubs, and just swimming in that bay, and then it all builds up to the Alcatraz swim. I'd urge people to do it on their own, because I think it's a much more all-encompassing experience, and you kind of you go out on the boat, and there's no real chance of sharks, but just for someone we hadn't really grown up swimming, if you grow up in South Africa or Australia or New Zealand or west coast of the US, you're very much used to swimming in waters where there are sharks, but for most of the swimmers that's quite a rarity. So for me, that was a real excitement of, well, they're not really here, but they might be.
But they might be, yeah.
They might be. I actually saw last month there was some footage on YouTube of some fishermen who hooked a 15-foot great white at Alcatraz.
Wow. Okay.
So they are there. Yeah, so they're around there.
Yeah.
They are there, but obviously, you're not going to see one. There's no chance of it. But it's just that feeling that they were added so much excitement to the swim, and you kind of go out on a tugboat, and it's chugging in the morning, and the mist's there, and there's a guy on the radio going, "Oh, we have a swimmer approaching Alcatraz. We have clearance from the Coast Guard. Swimmer in the water in 10." And then they'll turn to you, and you're there in your speedos, and they're like, "Right, are you ready for the jump? Are you ready for the jump?" It's like, "Swimmer entering the water in 10 seconds." And I was like,
better be.
So cool.
Yeah.
I felt like I was in The Rock or something. It was.
Yeah. So how hard's that to tee up? Because if you need to make sure the ferries don't drive over the top of you.
You just do it. You can't. Well, I'm sure you could do it with maybe the local swimming club on your own, or I'm sure local swimmers occasionally do it on their own. But I went with just a local company who they took me out on the boat. They guide you because it's very cold. I think it was 12 degrees, and depending on the currents, it can be an hour and 15, an hour and a half. So it's quite cold.
It's pretty lengthy.
It's pretty choppy. It's not. It's just in that sweet spot. I think if you're not a really experienced swimmer, for something that's really challenging, incredibly iconic, very memorable. Other people know it. So there's much more challenging swims that no one's ever heard of, and Alcatraz does hold that kind of iconic status. So I think that's probably one of my favorites. And then Yeah, we do like the cold swims. The Arctic Circle swims were
I mean,
phenomenal.
that's
We just
amazing.
actually, yeah, we found out this last night. There's a girl called Ellen Taylor and her mum who went out to the Arctic Circle. She'd read Jack's book, and they went and swam the Saltstraumen, which was the second largest maelstrom. And we were the first people to swim it, but they are the first women to swim it. Mother and daughter beat us. They one upped us and didn't do it in wetsuits. So
Ah,
that was just such an amazing moment to think. It was so awesome to know that someone else has gone and done that, had that experience. It's really remote up on the northwest coast of Norway. You know, you're in the Arctic Circle. There's this amazing ship captain called Knut Vestvig. He's been there for taking tours to the Maelstrom for 20 years. He's got sea eagles up in his ship cabin. Incredibly like
that's cool.
wise and old, a ship captain.
Yeah.
Never said a word. I sent him an email years ago that was, this email saying, "We're a bunch of swimmers from the UK. I've been looking at the Maelstrom. I don't think anybody's swum it. We'd love to charter your boat, etc." And all he responded was yes.
Okay. Because that swim must have taken some meticulous planning.
That was the most planning for a swim, because the river swim, I know it sounds, but the river does the work for you. There's
Sure.
only
Yeah.
one direction you can go. Anybody who's a medium competent swimmer could do a source to sea river swim. You find the source, you roughly work out how far you want to swim each day. We had, our mum meeting us, or if you could get a friend to drop a tent off every day. Not that difficult to plan. The Maelstroms, it was the first swim we'd done, which no one had. Well, no one had done the Eden, but lots of people have done river swims. Maelstrom swimming is pretty infant. There's about 8 known maelstroms in the world, of which only one of them had ever been swum previously.
Okay.
So it was pretty difficult to work out how to swim across it, how safely.
Yeah, I don't think I knew it was a thing until I saw that you guys had done it. So maybe, oh, I don't know. I mean, they must exist down this way, but I didn't really know of these places until I saw that you'd done it.
No, it's probably chance that we kind of happened upon it, because there's one of the most well-known ones is in Scotland. It also happens to be where the best whiskey in the world is from,
Oh, that's handy.
which is handy. And I think I'd heard about it years ago, because it's where George Orwell wrote 1984.
Right. Okay.
So he went to this desolate island of Jura, which is on the west coast of Scotland, to write. It's incredibly lonely and desolate place. And he was shipwrecked by the Maelstrom. Him and his cousin and nephew had their ship crashed against the rocks, and it was dragged into the Maelstrom. And I just remember, I don't know where I read it, and I was like, this is so cool. An actual whirlpool that dragged George Orwell into it when he was writing 94. I was like, this almost doesn't seem real. And we looked into it, and then, there's quite a few people who have swum it. The first person who swum the Corrie Vrecken, it's called the Corrie Vrecken as well, and there's these legends of a Celtic goddess who draped her hair into the ocean, and it formed a maelstrom. So there's all this amazing history and lore, and the first person to ever swim it was George Orwell's one-legged nephew.
Right.
So it was his nephew, who's Mark Blair, I believe, and he had one leg, and he swam it on the anniversary in 1984. So
Wow.
after George Orwell's death, he went to Jura in 1984. He swam across the Corrie Vrecken, first person ever to do it, first maelstrom. Actually, no, sorry, he's the second person to ever swim across a maelstrom, the first person to ever try swimming across a maelstrom, and arguably one of the most famous swimmers of all time is Sir Robert Webb, who was the first person to swim across the English Channel. He was a great British swimmer, swam across the Channel breaststroke, and in his time was a celebrity. And for his final challenge that he was going to do, that was going to be his nest egg for retirement and his final statement, there's a maelstrom at the bottom of one of the pools of the Niagara Falls. And he wanted to swim across the maelstrom, and he died attempting it.
Oh, wow.
So halfway across the maelstrom, he was dragged under and he was never seen again, and they never found his body. So when you're trying to plan a swim, and the first person to attempt it was arguably the pioneer of channel swimming, and he perished. And the second person ever to attempt it had this insane level of personal motivation. You know, his uncle was George Orwell, who was shipwrecked. You know, there's a level of psychology there which is just giving him strength beyond what anyone else would have for that swim. He'd since passed away as well, so there was not really much precedence to base the swim on.
No one to talk to about.
No, and I found there's a guy called Simon Murray who runs a company called Swim Trek, who do like adventure swimming. And he was the second person to swim the Corrie Vrecken in 2002, I think. And he said, I spoke to him and he was like, we just went there and we listened to the ship captain. There was a ship captain who was from the area who was taking tours, and he just thought, let's do it. You know, we can plan this safely. And he kind of advised me that I needed to go and build a relationship with the ship captain first and then return and develop some credibility and trust. So I just got into that world and I was like, it's so interesting. And then I found these other maelstroms. There is one in New Zealand. It's called Te Awa Muti. And there's a legend of the king Te Awa Muti, who rode a giant bird which crashed into that area and created the maelstrom. And then there's also another legend of a dolphin called Pelorus Jack, who lived in the maelstrom and met Captain Cook. And there's all these amazing tales, and yeah, it harkens back to a world of tea-stained maps and
yeah.
So
are you going to try and swim all 8 of them?
So we've done that. We've done the Moskstraumen and the Saltstraumen and the Corrie Vrecken. So they're the 3 biggest by volume and strength. The next one is Naruto in Japan, the Naruto Maelstrom. Which we're planning at the moment for March next year, it's a very challenging swim because the language barrier is pretty immense. I've got a friend who lives in Japan who's kind of helping me translate emails, but there's such nuanced terminology when trying, even to a very experienced swimmer, the terminology and the nuances are incredibly exact. So trying to explore something so precise in another language is really difficult. For instance, on the Saltstraumen, the second biggest maelstrom, we calculated with the tidal charts that we had to set off at 6:28 p.m. on the Monday morning, that the exact window of safety was 12 minutes. Mm-hmm. So you effectively are trying to catch the maelstrom as the tide switches. So that's the non-suicidal part of the swim.
Yep.
Without that, we finished that swim in 10 minutes, 45 seconds. So a margin of error of just over a minute.
Not much.
A language barrier that just gets that wrong by a minute, and you're a goner.
Yeah, so that one was quite short, but one of the other maelstroms was 8 kilometers or something. It was a much longer swim.
8 kilometers. Yeah, they're really unique, and so it's effectively where you get 2 really deep ledges. So you have an incredibly deep channel on either side of a really shallow ledge. And what happens is, as the tides change and move, these 2 huge deep chasms of water rush up over a really shallow channel. So huge volumes of water in opposing directions, and that's what creates them. That distance across, the Saltstraumen is like 350 meters. The Moskstraumen's 8 kilometers. That was mainly cycle. There's a lot of orcas in that region.
Well, this is my next question. Not only is it cold, there's killer whales.
Yeah, I would be completely lying to you if I said that I wasn't terrified. And it's irrational. No one has been killed by a killer whale in the wild ever. The only attacks on humans have been, animals that have effectively been tortured in captivity and kept for our amusement. So it's not I wouldn't blame and begrudge the odd orca for attacking I better not say that, but you know what I mean. I can see
Yeah, I know
why
what you mean. Yeah.
it happens. So it's totally irrational. It's similar to, well, great whites is more rational, but it's still relatively irrational because of the statistics and the numbers, the volume of people swimming daily versus the number of attacks. But so we kind of knew, look, even if we see them, they're highly intelligent. They'll come and have a look at us. More importantly, they're herring pods in Norway. So they're a species of killer whales that specifically hunt herring and fish. Apparently, there is more danger with the species of killer whale in California and Argentina, which hunt seals.
Well, I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But at the same time, you just don't want to be the first statistic.
Yeah.
It's it. I don't want to say it will happen, but you really don't want to be that first statistic. And it was definitely playing, on our minds. I've never really been in the water with a large predator and seen it. I've swam places where there are potentially great whites, or did some swims in Venezuela where there's bull sharks, but they're just massive, and it was that thought of potentially being in the water for so long and potentially seeing them that was something new to kind of try and cope with.
Yeah. Well, yes, you don't get them in lakes.
No, and then I was like, why didn't we stick to the UK?
And is your next swim? Is that the Lake Windermere swim?
No, no. So unfortunately, we're not doing Windermere.
Okay.
We were trying to plan it with. We're all in different places at the moment. Robbie's in Bratislava. I'm in Singapore. Jack's in London. Robbie was planning Windermere, and he didn't manage to get all of the logistics and the structure in place for. It's a very public lake, and we wanted to have it as like a group swim, but Robbie didn't manage to pull off the organisation and the structure of the swim. So we're postponing Windermere to next year, to next August, and then I'm doing a swim in Malaysia around something called the Perhentian Islands, which is a 16-kilometer swim around the islands, and it's kind of I've never done a long distance tropical swim. There's lots and lots of reef sharks, nothing too dangerous, and then the next swim for all three of us is Naruto, back to the maelstroms.
Back to the maelstroms. Well, you should come down to Australia during summer and do some of the swims up the coast. I mean, we do have sharks, but I've never seen one.
So you've never seen a shark while swimming?
No, Sydney Harbour's full of bull sharks, as far as I know. But no, I've never seen anything.
Have you had a friend or a swimmer ever had an incident?
No. I mean, you see plenty of little jellyfish, little blubbery things, and sometimes you can see some fish and reef and whatnot, but I've never seen any sharks. Oh, I do know people that have seen sharks, but no, I've never seen any.
Yeah, I think it's just the paranoia. I had this conversation with a friend the other day who hadn't seen Jaws. And I was like,
okay.
He's a surfer, and I was like, don't watch it.
Yeah, no, don't watch it.
don't watch it. That's an entire generation of people who are irrationally scared.
Yeah, it's done nothing for us, I don't think, has it?
And I thought that, because I was looking at, is it like Challenge Rottnest or Rottnest?
Oh, yes. Yep.
And
well, they did. So that was this, maybe this year or last year, they actually pulled a bunch of people out of the water because a shark was spotted. And that's the policy, I think. If you see a shark, game over. They pull people out. But a whole bunch of people had already finished by that time. But yes, there are a lot of sharks over in Western Australia. I don't know how often they're seen. I'm not sure of the stats there, but no one's been attacked in that swim before. And that's quite a famous swim, that one.
I think it is. I think it's almost kind of paying your dues, and it's what I felt after Alcatraz was the first swim I'd ever done where there was very slim, but the only first swim I'd ever done where there was a potential of a great white, and it was the most. It felt actually amazing, and I get that it's the reason almost for doing it, that the fact that they could be there or that they are there if you're doing Rottnest makes the challenge so much more enjoyable. And actually, how boring would it be? I had this conversation with someone is very scared of sharks. How boring would it be if they weren't there?
Yeah, yeah,
Let's go for a swim in the sea. There's nothing there.
yeah.
There is nothing. Nothing to be afraid of. Nothing that's higher up on the food chain. Would it have the same appeal? I think it's part of it, and it's not kind of some weird, delusion of wanting to be eaten or anything.
Yeah, no,
It's just the experience that,
it's part of that. It's connecting to it, isn't it?
yeah, and it's humbling yourself. Yeah, you're putting yourself in a position where you're not the top dog, and so much of being a modern human is, look how safe I am, and look how comfy I am, and everything that can kill us is gone. Especially the UK, we have no dangerous wildlife. We killed it all, and people often ask, like, what's the world going to look like in, the next 50 years, and how much will species loss affect us? And I always say to people, look at the UK. It's the perfect example. We're 50 years ahead. We've lost you. You just lose biodiversity. All that we have left is pigeons, rats, foxes, and that's pretty much it in England. Scotland's got much, more beautiful wildlife, but there's very little left. And we used to have, wild boars and beavers, big pods of killer whales, wolves, bears, and I think you lose something when it goes.
Well, there's a real a rewilding push in the UK, isn't it? Maybe it's almost parallel to the wild swimming idea, actually getting nature back.
There's a huge push for it, and I think it has to be done in the right way, because I think you can risk it becoming almost like a large, like almost like a zoo effectively. But yeah, they've successfully reintroduced beavers in Devon. Last I heard, they were looking at reintroducing lynx in Kielder
Really?
Forest in the north. Yeah, because lynx used to be native to the UK, and I think that you just lose a sense of wonder when you lose the big wildlife. And you've never seen a shark swimming in Australia, and we didn't see orcas swimming in Norway. But that sense of wonder, that knowing that an animal like that is there, is enough to make that place magical and to make that experience amazing. So I think you really lose something when you lose the big wildlife. And I've heard a lot of swimmers, especially ocean swimmers, who've had experiences swimming with whales or pods of dolphins that have almost, in a way, changed their life. And they've had such an amazing experience just out in nature during a swim. I read the book by Lynn Cox.
I've read that too. Yeah.
Yeah, The Day the Whale Came, and something so profound that I think I'd love that. Where are the
Yeah.
whales in Singapore? That's what I want to know.
I'm not sure there's much living in the waters around there anymore, is there at all? I don't
No,
know.
no. I spoke to the problem with Singapore. There's lots of things that they're doing right with their environmental policies, and that they plant a lot of trees, and they have a good part of their infrastructure is built with an environmental conscious. But there's lots of reclaimed land. I was speaking to a taxi driver the other day who said that where I live used to be where the seafront was, and I'm 300 meters away from the sea now. So they've built this huge area of reclaimed land. And he was saying that, when before then, they used to fish every day. There was colonies of green sea turtles and hatcheries up the coast. And since they built all the reclaimed land and had, the world's busiest shipping port just off the coast, I think, yeah, it's an interesting challenge. And I think as a swimmer, you're very much connected to it in a different way, because you're in the ocean every day. And, I'm sure you've seen, an increase of pollution. I was swimming here the other day, and I got a plastic bag full on the face.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks before, I was swimming with my dog. He's a really keen swimmer, and both of us I felt something sticky on my hand, and I kind of looked at my hand, and it was black, and I was like, what is that? And it was oil. And I
Oh,
stopped and looked around me, and we were just in this oil patch, and we spent pretty much 7 or 8 hours of me and him in the showers with like bicarbonate of
gee.
soda scrubbing all this oil off, and there'd been an oil slick. And
Oh, really?
so I think you're very much plugged into it as a swimmer, and you're directly affected by pollution. You're much closer to the natural world. I mean, it's not a high and mighty thing, but you are more exposed to it.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's my experience too. With beach cleanups and all that sort of thing, people that use the beach are usually pretty in tune with the whole idea of getting rid of pollution.
Yeah, I would totally agree, and I think it's obviously not everyone, but most people who enjoy the outdoors, you know, I think are probably more conscious of not littering, taking their rubbish with them. You know, I think it's obviously not the case 100% of the time, but I'm sure that if you canvassed popular opinion, people who spend their time doing outdoor sports are probably more likely to be aware or conscious or trying to limit in some way their environmental footprint. And that's one thing that we really think swimming can do is ocean swimming, sea swimming, river swimming, wild swimming, whatever you want to call it. It is probably the cheapest and easiest way to immediately get back in touch with nature. And it's we had this argument about the pollution in the rivers, and what we were trying to say was, well, we should experience it. If the rivers are dirty, we should swim in them, and then we should clean them. It, the
Hmm.
fact that they're
Yep.
dirty is not, that means that we should keep doing what we're doing. And if we weren't swimming in them, we wouldn't notice. This is what's happened. People have stopped, living outdoors every day and spending their time outdoors, and you fail to notice what's going on. So actually, by swimming in them, even if they're not 100% clean, that's kind of the point, and then you
Yep.
realize and do something about it.
That is the point. Yeah.
And I think it's true. I think especially in the UK, and especially for if you're lower income bracket, if you have hurdles or barriers in your way to accessing sports equipment, purchasing sports equipment, um, you know, lots of more traditional outdoor sports are quite expensive. If you want to get into cycling, well, guess what? A bike's pretty expensive.
Yeah. That's
You need clip-in shoes, you need your helmet. Um, Canoeing, that canoe's going to be sailing, etc. I love all those activities, but they are more expensive and harder to get into. Swimming, you can
you just
just
need
do it in
swimmers. Yeah.
the, and you
We
don't
can do it
even
in the
need
nude. Yeah. Yeah.
that. And that's, and you don't need to go for long. You can jump in, you know, just swim breaststroke for 5 minutes in a stream or a lake, and you'll get that feeling. Um, it doesn't seem to be a very classist or elitist outdoor activity. Obviously, when you start getting up to marathon swimmers, it's you have to be incredibly skillful and trained. But it's all different walks of life, and it's also one of the kind of most sexually agnostic activities out there, where at the top end, women are regularly out competing men, and I would probably, especially now, argue that the best open water marathon swimmers are all women. Um, there's a Sarah Thomas who did a 104-mile swim in the US, is
Wow.
going for a four-way channel swim at the moment. I don't know when it is. I think she's waiting for her weather window. A
Four
four-way
way.
channel.
Has anyone ever done four way?
There's another lady. I think she might be Australian actually, or maybe she's American, called Chloe McCardle.
Oh, she's Australian. Yeah.
She's
So
done
she's done
three
four.
three ways,
Oh, she's done three ways. Okay.
and she's tried a four-way, and I think she didn't manage the four-way. And then I watched the Kim Swims documentary on Netflix about the lady who swam from the Farallon Islands to San Francisco. And I took a boat out there after Alcatraz to treat myself on like a wildlife watching trip.
Yeah.
And it's this desolate rock about 20 miles out from San Francisco, nothing else around it, huge colony of seals, and it's one of the biggest migratory routes of great whites in the world, a great white hotspot. And I just couldn't imagine even that anybody at 2 a.m. in pitch black had managed to get off that boat and just swim to the island, surrounded by the seals, and even start the swim, let alone carry on. And it's it seems to be. I like being involved in something where it's not like a macho chest beating sport, even if you want to call it that. Yeah. It's well, let's see how tough you are. There's no point talking about it. There's no point overblowing it, because when you get in the water, it's just you and your thoughts. And
yep. Are you tempted by the English Channel?
I am tempted by the English Channel. My little brother Jack's really, really keen for it. We need to be living by the sea for I couldn't train for it in Singapore. Yeah, I'm really the ones that we most want to do. If I was wrinkly on my deathbed and the swims I hadn't done, the one I really want to do the English Channel. I really want to do an ice mile. I really want to finish the Maelstroms. I would love to do Robben Island.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Another kind of, I love the swims that have history, and you can just feel they're an iconic swim. I went to South Africa when I was 15 on a rugby tour and went to Robben Island, and it was my first time ever leaving Europe, and it was an incredible experience. So I'd love, but I do struggle psychologically in the long distance with great whites.
Right. Yeah. For those really cold ones, you'd probably want to put on 20 kilos of fat, wouldn't you? Because you do like triathlons and swim runs and things, like you'd be pretty lean.
Yeah, so I had to get a bit fat for the ice kilometer, and it was it's so strange. Like, okay, it's just vanity and it's your ego, but at the same time, I felt a bit weird I put on a bit of weight, and it was the first time I looked at, like, I've lost it now because I've been sweating for 3 months, but I looked at a photo in January, and I had a big jowl, and I'd never seen myself with a jowl before. And my girlfriend had started to notice. She was like, because I was basically in the evenings just drinking strawberry milkshake and eating ice cream. And there's part of you that feels a bit guilty because you're like, I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying the fact that for training, I have to have a pint of strawberry milkshake before bed. And I put on, quite a bit of weight, and it did make a difference. I think I enjoyed it. I kind of like that kind of, I love to see the swimmer at the pool that rocks up and everyone's like, who's that guy? It's freezing. It's 2 degrees, and never seen him before. And
doesn't look like much of an athlete.
Yeah, big beer belly, and just rocks up and knocks out an ice mile. There's a lady at my local pool who, Julie, I think she was 46. Yet you would never ever think she was an extreme athlete, and she just casually used to do ice kilometers for breakfast on a daily basis, and didn't really, and just without even thinking. And I got into the sauna one day and I got chatting to her, and I was like, yeah, I'm done, 600 meters today. I'm, going for the ice kilometer. She was like, oh yeah, I just did, 24 lengths. What's that? 1.2 kilometers. And I was like, oh my God.
Okay.
Yeah. And then she just was like, oh, you're trying a kilometer. Oh, I might go for the mile then. And then a couple of weeks later on a Monday morning, just got a text. Yeah, I've done the ice mile.
Yeah, did the mile. Do another one tomorrow.
And I love that. Is that I think it's the one beautiful thing about open water swimming and oceans, especially when you get to the marathon swimmers, you just can't tell. And you can tell who's the heavyweight boxing champion of the world, and you can tell who the 100-meter sprint champion is. And there's nothing wrong, that peak physical fitness. But there's something that I love about just somebody getting up and being like, actually, do you know what? For this sport that I do, that's incredibly extreme, like I think there's a strong argument to be made that of all extreme sports, long distance ocean swimming is probably the most. No other sport do you have to worry about large scale wildlife eating you. That is
Yep.
not even high altitude climbers, which is kind of on that precipice of incredibly extreme, in touch with nature. There's a different level of fear, but it's the unpredictable element of an animal. And there are, the Kim Swims documentary. There was a guy who tried to do the swim before her, who had to get pulled because of a great white.
Right.
He's an Australian bloke, and he was so funny in his interview. He's like, "Yeah, I'm not too worried about sharks. It's mainly crocodiles that worry me."
Well, yeah, they're a thing too.
Now
They'd be
they scare me.
well, yeah. If you were wild swimming in north of Australia, there's crocodiles everywhere. I don't know. I don't think people do that. Like, it's just you just don't do that.
No, that we got we were kind of a year or two back coming up with some ideas for a TV series with a production company that was going to be almost like Top Gear does swimming. Kind of going on an adventure as swimmers, camping along the way. And we got approached by a production company who was like, "Do you think you could do like a Heart of Darkness style swim down the Congo?"
Right?
And I was like, "No, you will. We will be eaten by a crocodile within a day." It, I think they're pretty much the only wildlife. I read about Lewis Pugh did some swims in the Arctic, and he spoke about leopard seals in a similar way. You just can't. If there's
Yeah,
one in
right.
the water, you can't. It's not like a shark where you assess the movement of the shark. Where are the fins? Is it circling? Is it in aggressive manner? A lot of the time, from what I've read, ocean swimmers might see a shark on a marathon swim, and the shark leaves, and they carry
Yeah.
on swimming. I think crocs are incredibly territorial and just go for you.
Yeah, I don't think sharks are typically interested in you, but I think crocs are. They will come and
Yeah,
get you.
yeah. There's actually a lot around here. There's about 25 saltwater crocs in the north of Singapore. We were
Is
in
there?
Yeah, me and my girlfriend were in Borneo last weekend. We went to see the proboscis monkeys with the big noses, and I was like, "It's going to be amazing swimming. It's going to be beautiful." And everywhere there was "Do not swim" signs, crocodiles, crocodiles. And we spoke to a few people. They lose, about every 2 weeks, someone gets eaten by a croc.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't know
um,
that.
yeah, and I've never really thought about it. And but yeah, the migratory routes for estuarine and saltwater crocodiles are all over Indonesia, all the way up through Singapore, all over across the Philippines. There was a kid who got eaten by one in the Philippines the other day, and apparently the rising sea temperatures mean that there's a lot of crocs making the crossing from northern Queensland to Timor Leste. I don't know what the straits are
Right.
called. There's a straits there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Good
Yeah,
news.
yeah, great.
Cheers for sending us all your
They're
crocs.
coming to you. I've taken up heaps of your time, but I wanted to ask you one more thing. Your videos and stuff, they're all they're great. Your videos are really well produced, and you've got the books. How do you manage your media? Who does all that? Because it's really lovely stuff.
It's been. Yeah, you should have seen the first website we did. So I built the first website that we made, and honestly, it was an offence to graphic design and media. So I think we've just. It's been a gradual process. Yeah, the first post we ever did on Instagram, you'd look at it and your eyes would hurt. It's taken us a. It's we've never been afraid to do something that doesn't look great. So actually, that's led to this, process over the last 5 years where because we just started taking a picture on a rubbish camera and posting it, it's allowed us to get better. And
Yep.
my little brother Jack he's always been a writer, and he's a really really skilled writer. And that's the book was written by him. He writes a lot of our blog posts and stuff. And I think all three of us really enjoy writing. Robbie, my older brother, is a really talented artist, so he does a lot of drawing and sketches and has a really good eye for design. I think we just enjoy it, and sometimes you get caught in this kind of catch-22 of like, well, should I be filming this? Should I take a picture? Like, do I need to? Especially like as we've kind of created it, it's oh god, every time I go for a swim, have I got to take a pic and
Yeah, yeah.
put it online? And like, it's I've it's a weird kind of, you don't want to get caught in that too much. And at the same time, though, we just enjoy it, and we enjoy kind of having a record of it. And I know that one day I'm going to have kids, and they'll be, laughing at me because I use YouTube and don't.
Whatever that. Yeah.
No one cares about YouTube anymore, Dad.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, well, look at this video we did. It's got 200 views. So I think we enjoy it, and I love writing about swimming. I love hearing about other people swimming. I love helping people. We're writing a series on how to plan your own expedition, and I love that kind of side of it. And I like to have a record of it. And it just so happens now that, back in the day, you'd have, my gran did it. You'd have a photo, you'd go on holiday, you'd take 200 photos, you'd put them in a photo album, and you'd have that in your house forever. And any time anyone came around, it's like, should we do Corfu 1998 again? And you're like, oh my God, Grandma, I've seen it 100 times. This is what we had for breakfast on the first day. And then we went to this church, and then we went to this beach. So people have been doing this, for years. And now it's just online. And instead of having a physical photo album in my house that I force you to look through when you come round and you politely mumble your way through, it's online. And the nice thing about online is you don't have to look. And we always have these conversations with people. If you're not interested in it, don't look at it.
Don't worry. Don't follow me.
Yeah, it's kind of like going up to, a notice board, and there's a notice board with yoga classes, and calling them up and going, I didn't want yoga classes. Why are you at? And like, it's not for you. If you're not interested in swimming, if you're following the Wild Swimming Brothers, I can tell you.
What are you doing? It's not compulsory.
You've probably gone wrong.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find with this podcast that there's a lot of people out there who don't want to just be, reading clickbait titles and wasting their time on social media. And people want to read stuff or look at stuff that's engaging, and it's nice to try and add something into the ether of the online world that's a little bit more thoughtful.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I certainly hope so, because I like this whole idea of chatting and hearing what you've got to say, because you're an interesting person, and so hopefully people listen, but I guess we'll find out. Thanks very much to Callum Hudson for taking so much time to chat to us here on the pod. If you'd like to read any more about what Callum is up to, or check out the next adventure of the Wild Swimming Brothers, get over to the website at www.thepodpodcast.net. That's www.thepodpodcast.net, and from there you'll find links to all of that good stuff. Thanks for listening in. That was very cool. My name's Mark West. I'll catch you next time.